Hello, I'm Mitch Davenport, and I'm a therapist here at Dr. Jackie Jung and Associates. And I thank you for taking time to watch this video today. On my left is Megan Heffernan. She is a licensed clinical social worker and one of the therapists here. And on my right is Dr. Jackie Jung. She has a doctor in psychology degree and is a psychologist who does psychological testing and some therapy. Today we'd like to talk to you about anxiety. Right now we are living in what I like to call the age of anxiety, though I suppose people living during World War I or World War II or Vietnam or any of those major conflicts might call theirs the age of anxiety as well. I didn't mention I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor and a certified clinical anxiety treatment provider. And I'm going to share with you today 3 different aspects of anxiety and 8 or 9 very brief interventions. I'm not going to go through the details. I'm just going to give you an idea of the kinds of things we do when we treat anxiety. But the first cluster for anxiety, the first aspect that we want to look at is anxiety, panic, and worry. There are a lot of different diagnoses, and I'm just kind of lumping them all together here. But panic is the physical arousal that we feel when we become super anxious. Most of you have known someone, or maybe it's happened to you, the heart thumping, the pulse racing, feeling dizzy, tingly, shortness of breath. Those all come with panic, which is obviously a result of anxiety. There's often heightened physical tension, stress or tension in the jaw, the neck, and the back. And as bad as these symptoms are, the exciting thing is we can do various things to interrupt the process of anxiety. And the first and most basic one that most people don't like is take care of the body. And it's so important. Anxiety is a physical disorder. And the better working order our body is in, the better it's going to be able to stave off the results of the anxiety. One of the things that a lot of people do not do that is important, if someone has really bad anxiety, they should stay away from nicotine and caffeine. I just wanted to mention that as far as the taking care of the body. The second way we address anxiety, panic, and worry is through our breath. And our breath is very, very important to appropriate bodily functioning. Our brain uses about 25% of the oxygen that our body takes in. And by manipulating our breath and breathing certain ways, we can increase the oxygen to the brain, which decreases the anxiety and helps us focus on our breath instead of our thoughts or the anxiety. And the final one that I'm going to mention for this cluster is to be mindful. Mindfulness is something that has become quite popular, perhaps a little bit faddish, but think about this for a minute. For the most part, people who have depression are dwelling on the past in some way, shape, or form. People who have anxiety are more geared to the future, and they're worried about something serious happening in the future. Well, being mindful is being in the here and now, being in the present moment, and not dwelling in the past and not worrying about the future. The second cluster is tension, stress, and dread. And that comes primarily with generalized anxiety disorder. And it's just that feeling that nothing's going to get better. In fact, I had a client recently who was talking about how anxious he was and how he had a panic attack. And I was asking him his thoughts as he was being anxious. And he said to me, well, I thought that I'm going to be anxious the rest of my life. And that was a sense of dread. I don't want to be like this the rest of my life. I don't want to have this problem. So in order to deal with the tension, the stress, and dread, there are a few different things we can do. The first one is don't listen when worry calls your name. And what I mean by that is We are more than our thoughts, and we are more than our feelings. We don't have to listen to our thoughts, and we don't have to act on our feelings. In fact, I'm fond of saying, don't believe everything you think. Now, we're talking about changing long established habits of thinking. And so it takes persistence, it takes time, it takes effort, but by changing our thought patterns, we can have a huge, huge impact on our worry. And then the final cluster is rumination. And that is when the thought just goes around and around and around in your head, and it's a negative thought, or it's a thought that's causing anxiety. What I think of when I think of rumination is a cow chewing cud. Try to say that fast. A cow chewing cud. Okay, I did. Anyway, so there are three things we can do. There are actually more than that, but there are three main things we can do when we're ruminating. One is there is a thought stopping technique that I teach my clients with anxiety on how to actually stop those anxious thoughts. Or maybe another way to change it would be, or to say it would be, to change the channel on our thoughts. A second way is to worry well, but only once. In other words, try and, well, actually it goes with the last one, learn to plan instead of worry. The idea is when we're worrying about something bad happening, we're putting ourselves through the experience, and it may not even happen, but yet we experienced it because we worried about it as if it was going to happen. So what we want to do is we want to plan our future. I mean, like tomorrow, this week, etc. And have a plan for the future. Once we have a plan, know we have a plan, and quit worrying about the outcome. You've planned well, you've made preparation, and things are going to go okay. So that's the end of my section. I'm going to turn it over now to Megan, who's going to add a few of her thoughts on anxiety. Mm-hmm. Megan?
Thank you, Mitch. You did a really nice job of summarizing a lot of the experiences of anxiety and kind of the basis for where to begin on how to start and disrupt that process. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate or piggyback off of something that Mitch said, one of the lines that I say frequently with people that are experiencing anxiety, or when I'm working on anxiety with them, is that anxiety lies. It's one of the biggest liars that I know, and it's very mean like that. And helping people to recognize that and keep that in mind is another way that then they can go about dismantling some of those untrue thoughts and worries that anxiety provokes and brings up for them. For my part today, there was one thing that I wanted to focus on is oftentimes I am asked, especially by parents that have a child who experiences anxiety, is when is it appropriate to remove my kid from this situation that is making them anxious? And I work with a lot of teens and even school-age kids, and oftentimes they will leave class or they will be kind of trapping themselves in a bathroom or avoiding parties and social situations, etc., because for them, those situations are very anxiety-provoking, and that is something that's really difficult for them to deal with. And so I get asked, am I supposed to allow my kid to then come home from school? Should I force them to stay when they're texting me saying they're crying in the bathroom? And that's, it's a difficult question to approach because, of course, we don't want to tell a kid, no, suck it up, you have to stay in this environment that's making you feel that way. But my general response to people is that if the situation itself is something that is toxic or negative, then yes, absolutely, we should remove ourselves or encourage somebody else, their child, to remove themselves or to stop engaging with that environment. In this calendar year, we've all experienced stress because of the COVID pandemic. Yes. So one example would be if you are constantly watching the news, looking at statistics, you're bombarding yourself and your mind with a lot of negative information, and that can become very toxic. So a way to help with that would be to limit your exposure. turn on the nightly news at 5 p.m., watch the half-hour segment, and then turn it back off. Don't sit with the TV on and continuously scrolling through news and story after story of something that is negative, because that's too much exposure, and that becomes then toxic for you. If a child is on social media for a long time, especially if they're getting bullied on there, depending on the content that they are looking at, that can be an overexposure to very toxic, negative information, therefore not helping them with their anxiety or dealing with their anxiety. So generally with school is, in essence, a positive environment. Kids are expected to go there to socialize, to learn, and we don't want to simply allow kids to avoid it. Sending that message of, yes, if it's tough, let's just come home, is not going to help them in dealing with that difficult environment. We want to give them skills, like Mitch had suggested and kind of touched on, to help them get through those times and how to manage and what can we do. Is it okay to take a break, go to the counseling office for 10 minutes if you're experiencing heightened levels of panic, but then can we return to the classroom? By simply removing kids from school, that's taking away the potential for them to learn how to adapt to being in that environment, and it's not going to be helpful for them as they progress throughout life. If they've always avoided the environment that triggers them, they're going to have a hard time being functional in a workplace when they're older and day to day.
Right, sounds like a resilience type of thing.
Yeah.
Promote resilience, exercise your coping skills. If you never exercise, you don't really know if it works or not. The practice makes perfect. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was the end of what I had to share today. So turning it over to you.
Hi, this is Dr. Jackie Zhang. I just now forgot my brain, so I'm bringing it here. I use that a lot in my demonstration. So this is the brain. I think I'm going with more a different angle. They did a great job covering all the coping skills. All I can add is some more biological, neurological perspective of anxiety. Okay, this is your brain, and you cut it in half in the middle so you can kind of see inside. Our emotional center, where anxiety is associated, is amygdala. It didn't say it on this brain, but somewhere in the middle sector, okay, and that's generating or in charge of your emotions like anger, resentment, happiness, fight or flight, that type of thing. And that center, amygdala, linked to your memory. They did a study, women's activity, brain activity between the amygdala and the memory that are stronger than men's. I don't know if that has anything to do with why women more emotional, but so when you're triggered by something, the middle part, amygdala, is flashing, right? Because you're thinking, you're all freaking out, and the frontal lobe here. The frontal lobe part is the processing section of your brain. That's your like the processor of your computer. That's making decisions. Okay, so your frontal lobe is working, and then you would make a decision in a situation that you have to swing or you have to punch somebody, you have to just walk away. So these are two different sectors in your brain that actually work when it comes to how you react in a situation. A lot of times when you're too much anxious, too infected by your emotions, whether it's a fear or anxiety, anger, they call it hijacking your frontal lobe. So your frontal lobe is not really working now. It's all these blood, everything it's going towards your amygdala and the limbic system, and they starting to overflood your brain with all these emotions. So it's almost you're suppressing your frontal lobe. So that's why people cannot or should not make decisions when you're angry, when you're sad, depressed, right? Or when you're anxious. You just don't want to grab anything to make yourself, feel better. So you want your frontal lobe to make a decision. Even at your worst time, your frontal lobe, the worst time, it's better making decision than your emotional center. Okay, so there are two different sectors. So back to what you guys talk about, taking deep breath, deep breathing. Why do you want to take a deep breathing 10 times? Inhale, exhale. It's to get your blood flow. In a new biological perspective, you get all this oxygen to your frontal lobe. So your frontal lobe can think, make a better decision, okay? And why count to 10, 1 to 10? Because you're buying time for your frontal lobe to make a better decision instead of let your emotional center make a decision. So emotional center make the worst decision ever, and the frontal lobe always makes better decisions. Okay, so that kind of explained why we don't want to make decisions when we are emotional, even including like a euphoria, when you're super happy and then you go to buy a car and then afterwards like, ugh, shouldn't have done that. And
or when you're in love.
yes, I know, right? Right, that's a good point. But anyway, okay, all right. That's a good point. Next one, I want to do because of the memory part. I talked about your emotional center connected directly to your memory part. So whatever you happened in the past triggered your emotions, and everybody's trigger is different, because everybody's past is different. For example, in the past, I really, when I was 12, 11, I experienced something like in the Forrest Gump movie, when Forrest Gump walked on the bus, and then they said, "You can't sit here." You remember that plot? And I experienced a similar one, but it's the flip. And I was sitting there, and the school bus, I think it might be a field trip, is packed with kids. The kids even standing in the middle, and everybody would have seated, and I don't have a partner. I just have an empty seat, and the whole trip there, driving there, nobody sit there. So I don't know. Don't ask me why, but it's for me. That's memory in a small brain. Small person's brain is locked up. That's my memory. So after growing up in different situations, become self-awareness. I understand that. For example, if Megan and Mitch decide to go out party and stuff and not including me, not telling me and stuff, because that triggered my memory, right? Not being included in any activity, anything, everybody else having fun. So when I come to the office, I just flipped. I don't probably at that moment don't know. I just flipped. How did I guys going to parties? I saw you guys' picture on the Facebook, and I flipped. I would not even know what happened because that triggered my memory and then triggered my anxiety. And then they were like, actually, they probably would say, "Well, you're so busy, we didn't want to allow you, blah, blah, blah. I saw you guys' picture. You guys had so much fun." So you have to know your trigger point. Everybody's trigger point is different, so for some people, like if some people was big as a kid, heavy set, their trigger point probably would be called chubby. Oh, that clothes makes you kind of look big. My son said, "Mom, that shirt makes you look fat," but that was not my trigger point. I was never big, so if you can joke about it, say, "Jackie, you kind of look kind of gain weight or something," it would not make me flip, but will make somebody that is insecure, however they look right now, kind of just. So that's what my point is. Know your trigger point that directly linked to the anxiety. Sometimes it could be a trauma, not necessary. It could be trauma, so that linked to what we talked about. And what's the coping skill? Mitch had it very good, and Megan talked about how not to pull yourself always out of the position. I want to add it on one thing besides the count to 10, deep breathing, and not pull yourself always out of the situation. To exercise practice makes perfect. I want to put it there because sometimes the people say my brain freeze. Yeah, because your brain don't have enough oxygen or blood flow there. Your emotional center hijacking your brain. So when you feel you freeze, you can't do nothing. You try your best to do business as usual. What do I mean business as usual? What you're supposed to be doing right now. I'm supposed to make my coffee, drink my tea. I'm supposed to take my bath, take my shower. I'm supposed to brush my teeth or type up something. Do your best. Well, Jackie, sometimes I need to do it right now, response. Well, use all your coping skills right at that moment. Debriefing, do the best you can. There are just certain things we can't guarantee you will always find the best solutions, coping skills for a certain situation, but you have to practice, utilize all these tools, what Megan and Mitch said, 10 of them, try each of them until it become a habit. How many days to create a habit? This had 6 days, 66 days. When it become a habit, become automatic. When you're panicky, instead of just grab something or say something or text somebody, what should I do? You use that automatic establish a habit pattern to solve the problem. And you will notice that your frontal lobe is working so much, again, your frontal lobe are making decisions so much better than your emotionals. And by sitting on the certain things for a while, or calming yourself down, or do some, deep breathing. And then it doesn't have to be long deep breathing. It could be like quick ones, just like the athlete before they run. They do that, and then they get oxygen from your frontal lobe, and then they can think, okay? That we just met from. I don't want to contradict with anybody. So if you guys see some information like, why you teach me this and Mitch teach you that, and make it, I believe our theories are similar. It's just everybody focus on different things. So if you feel there are some contradictions, do some research on YouTube, online, Google it, and figure it out. Make that yours coping skills. So instead of just what we suggest, when it becomes yours, is yours forever.
Yes.
Yes. Right?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, there can be a list of 10 coping mechanisms, and there might be 2 or 3 that really work well for me. There might be 2 other ones that work well for Mitch, and others that work well for Jackie. We might all benefit from a couple of them. So, again, everybody works differently because of, like Jackie brought up, we have different memories. We have different trigger points. So different strategies might work well for one person opposed to another.
Yes.
Very good.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you.
Don't forget to like our video and to share to your friends and families. Thank you.
All right.
Tony is so helpful.
She is.
Are we recording still?
Are you still recording? Oh, that's silly.
Because I never include Tony. Tony,
Yeah, we do
say
need
hi.
to get her.
I know. Hi.
Yeah, don't record him saying that. That would-
No.
That is not going to be very professional, Mitch. But I do.
If I undress, well, just my sweater. I didn't say everything.
I know, right? You didn't say everything.
Yeah, it doesn't say amygdala.
No, we didn't, because it says.
Got the thalamus and the hypothalamus.
These are part of the limbic. So
Yeah.
amygdala was actually part 2 of little dots right next to these.
Yeah, I was
The
going to say,
center.
I thought it was right around
How to pronounce the plural? Amygdala, L-A-E. So amygdala,
lie.
amygdalae, Mitch.
I don't know. I'm thinking.
Amygdalae. So that's why I didn't use the word, because I don't know how to say plural.
I don't know how to say it either.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever felt like I needed to
Attempted.
make it plural.
You start recording now. How do you click on off?